the recording, just so everyone's aware.
Meaning you. Shh. Yeah, that is for me.
That is for you.
I didn't for you.
Did everyone get a handout?
Yes. Thank you.
All right, then I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you guys so much for being here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lauren Cosrow. I am the librarian here, and I'm also the chair of the assessment committee.
And I am Christopher Clem, and I help her out in every way possible.
That's a very accurate job description. Well, thank you again for coming. And basically what we're trying to accomplish in these open forums are, first of all, to kind of update you where we are in the process and our assessment work this semester on campus. And you guys are very involved. So kind of give you an update on where we are, and then also to provide a space to have a conversation about our general education outcome provision. So the first part, we're going to be talking a little bit about just kind of updating you guys where we are in this project. And then kind of the second part, we will be having a conversation about our proposal for the revision of our general education outcomes. So just a reminder, we want to communicate this as much as we can, but our vision for the assessment work that we're doing on campus prior to our focus visit in April 2020, but really just kind of a holistic vision for the assessment work that we're doing is to develop and implement a systematic, sustainable structure for student learning outcomes assessment at both the program level and the general education level here at Triton College. So that's our long-term, kind of our vision to create a systematic, sustainable structure. So all the work that we're doing this semester is really done with that vision in mind. So our project is a two-phase project plan. The first is this work around processes, mapping, and structure. And that's what's currently being done this academic year. And it's really geared towards building this foundation for both our program level and our general education outcomes assessment. Where next academic year, we're going to be really focusing on the implementation, right? So building those structures, those processes, revising when necessary this year, and then focusing on implementing, assessing, and then allocating resources the following year. Oh, thank you, Pamela. So just an update, right? This semester, we're focusing on developing and revising our program outcomes. And so, like I said, many of you are involved in that work. And then we are currently in the process of revising our general education outcomes. Where next semester, a lot of this work is going to be focusing on creating assessment maps and then also revising the assessment process, the assessment cycle, kind of assessing our assessment processes, right? Like looking at what has been working, what really hasn't been working for us, and doing some work around there. And then kind of this whole year, we're really focusing on creating a common assessment terminology, having a shared language where we have conversations around discussions, and that's a shared understanding across the campus community, and then continuing to communicate on this process, where we're at, where we're going, what we've accomplished, and communicating all of that with the campus. So this is a screenshot of our professional development calendar, and so you can see we're over halfway through now. So we've had a few open forums that were kind of presenting the project plan. Our program assessment developers have been involved in trainings and workshops, and so this whole slate of professional development was targeted towards educating the campus community on our work, and then also that more targeted professional development for our program assessment plan developers who've been specifically doing that work around our program outcomes and our program outcome development. And so we're currently in that slate talking about our general education outcomes, and then once that work is accomplished, the rest of the semester will really be focused on kind of capturing what we did this semester, and then also looking forward to the work that will be done next semester. So the work around our general education outcomes is really framed by the AAC and Rubrics. So the Association of American Colleges and Universities have produced the value rubrics, and you have copies of those that were handouts in front of you. They have 16 rubrics overall, but we've pulled out the ones that are going to be the most relevant to our general education outcomes and the revision works that we're doing. So the AAC rubrics have been developed by teams of faculty experts from colleges and universities across the United States. And what these rubrics do is they articulate fundamental criteria for each learning outcome along with performance descriptions. And so if you look at the rubrics, right, for the top one is a rubric for critical thinking, right? So these rubrics were developed by faculty from higher education institutions, including community college faculty from across the U.S. And they identified, like I said, there's 16 of these value rubrics, identified these kind of, larger domains, and they produced these rubrics to help faculty with assessing these general education outcomes. And so the rubrics are tools to be used. So what we've done is we've adapted and used some of their language that's more standardized language. What that's really going to help us do is they're intended for kind of this institutional level use in evaluating and discussing student learning around some of these outcomes. And so they really allow evidence of student learning to be shared through a common dialogue and an understanding of student success. For example, critical thinking could look very different in different disciplines across the institution. So what a faculty member in nursing might see as a critical thinking skill could be very different from a philosophy instructor or someone in automotive tech, right? And so across the institution, we could have very different, if you ask individual faculty members, very different ideas of what it means to have a student be competent in critical thinking. What a rubric like this does allows us to have shared conversations and shared language across the institution for these outcomes that truly are general education outcomes, right? They should apply to learning that's going on across the institution. So these rubrics allow us to do that.
And that, I think, is somewhere where has been difficult institutionally up to this point, because we have had these general education outcomes, but we haven't had the common language to talk about them and discuss them. And so I think that's then why they were failing to be assessed, is because it was hard to get your head wrapped around them. Whereas these break them down into, and by all means, as you go through the rubrics, right, we're not talking about you will be using every single thing on the rubric. It's a resource for you to begin thinking about how in your classroom can you see a fit or a tie to that general education outcome.
Yeah, so like Christopher referred to on the left-hand side, you see some of those kind of sub-constructs, right? So underneath critical thinking, what are some of the skills, behaviors, knowledge that students should be able to show as a result of learning? And you can see those sub-constructs listed out on the left-hand side of that rubric, along with the performance descriptions along the top, right? The different levels of learning. Okay. So our current general education outcomes, they're listed here for those of you who may not be as familiar with them. We have 9 general education outcomes currently, and 9 is a lot, right? 9 general education outcomes, a lot of general education outcomes. And when we talk about systematically assessing them, right, to do that in a successful way, we have to be assessing 3 general education outcomes a year, right? If you're in a 3-year cycle, even if we broke it up a little bit longer to 4 or 5 years, we'd still be doing multiple general education outcomes. Otherwise, it would be a 9-year cycle, right? And students are long gone by then, right? So 9 is a lot of general education outcomes to cover when we talk about assessing them. And so what we've done is I've listed out the current ones, started to here, demonstrated critical thinking, practice analytic inquiry, learned information literacy, practice quantitative reasoning, demonstrated communication fluency, you want to go ahead to the next one, practice technological fluency, engaged diverse perspectives and civic issues, encountered sustainable practices, and then acquired and applied knowledge specific to a field of study. So these are all what a student will be able to do as a result of going through a degree program here at Triton. And so those 9 general education outcomes, what the assessment committee has done is revise them to 5, so a little bit more manageable, and then also to make these, truly general education outcomes where they could apply to learning across the institution. So it's not necessarily that everyone will be able to see, specifically what they do represented in the general education outcomes, but that the general educational outcomes are broad enough to reflect the learning that's occurring across our campus. And so we have aligned these, the revised general education outcomes with value rubrics. And so I'll kind of walk through and explain how this process went. So you can see that critical thinking, right? That's one of the general education outcomes. That's not going anywhere, right? So critical thinking, but that's tied directly to the critical thinking value rubric. The same thing with several of these other ones. The communication, the AAC value rubrics actually breaks it into two. So written communication and oral communication. Our standing general education outcome only addresses written communication. So this will allow flexibility to use either rubric to address oral communication or written communication. For information literacy, that's tied directly to an information literacy rubric. Quantitative literacy, same thing, a rubric from the AAC&U. And then this fifth outcome that we've revised is, we've titled it Global Learning. And so there is a global learning value rubric, but even in the rubric language, the AAC&U recognizes, as you kind of flip through it towards the back, the AAC&U recognizes that this larger kind of idea of global learning, faculty may be able to recognize some of these subcomponents that are basically more specific to maybe the work that's going on in your classroom or the discipline that you're teaching. So there's three other rubrics that are very closely aligned to this concept of global learning, and we'll flesh out some of those ideas even more. So intercultural knowledge and competence, civic engagement, and ethical reasoning. We've included all of those in the packet as well. So if the work that's going on in your classroom really does align to the rubric of global learning, you can do that one. If not, there are these three other rubrics that you can use to also assess kind of that more of that subcomponent that are going on in your classroom. And this really allows faculty some more flexibility when it comes to assessing the learning that's going on in your classroom. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Just again, to sort of point out the fact that it may seem like we're trying to match together a whole bunch of things. The idea was to make it as general as possible, right? Because the concept here, and the reason why we've gone from going from 9 down to 5, is that it's not just picking from a menu. These must be systematically assessed on a regular schedule. And so to hit on this fifth one, right, we realized that it may, to some people, seem as if, okay, in my math class, how am I going to be global learning, right? There are ways then by broadening it out with these other very closely related rubrics that you should be able to, in any discipline, find some way that will roll or funnel up to that global level learning as an outcome, because it must be assessed.
Mm-hmm. Great. So we're just going to walk through. We have the proposal. It's the one with the Triton letterhead that's in front of you if you're unable to grab it. They're over on the table there. But just to walk through some of the language. So the first half of this proposal is really just communicating the similar information that we did. And then just to kind of frame this again, that these general education learning outcomes, they are achieved as a result of successful completion of the general education requirements for any degree program. So the outcomes state that upon completion of a degree program, students should be able to effectively, right, and then that's maybe the second half of the sentence is going to be the different general education outcomes. So the first one, critical thinking. Students will be able to explore issues, ideas, artifacts, and events before accepting or formulating an opinion or conclusion. So they can read through these and then we can kind of open up a conversation. Okay. So the next one for communication, this is both written and oral. Our current only reflects written communication. So students will be able to develop and express ideas in written or oral form. The third one, information literacy. Students will be able to identify, locate, evaluate, and effectively, responsibly use and share information. The fourth one, quantitative literacy. Students will be able to analyze and solve quantitative problems from a wide array of contexts. And then the fifth one, global learning. Students will be able to analyze and explore complex global challenges from diverse perspectives. So again, this language is really rooted in the AAC and U value rubrics. We really wanted that to be kind of our anchor as we developed the language and revised the language for these general education outcomes. Again, this was language that was developed from faculty across the country, from a variety of institutions, from community colleges to universities, and so really tying ourselves to a national standard, and then this kind of idea of sharing this language across disciplines, across areas of the institution. So with that being said, we'd love to hear any comments, any feedback, on anything from the use of the rubrics through to the language of the outcomes. As you're thinking about that, the next steps with this would be we're holding one more open forum to have this conversation, and our hope is to introduce this for a vote at the next academic senate meeting. So kind of get some feedback, hear some input, potentially make some revisions as a result of that, and then moving on to academic senate for a vote. And if it passes that vote for academic senate, then we move on to the vice president for recommendations. So any questions, comments, and sort of looking over these outcomes?
So what does it really mean? If I'm teaching financial accounting classes, right, and let's say we accept this, we vote for this, that means every single class that I teach, doesn't matter, financial, managerial, whatever the class is, I have to somehow address my assessment towards these 5 areas.
So what the general education outcomes do, right, theoretically, right, is they guide the learning of the institution, right? So all courses, all programs should be mapped to the general education outcomes, and it should be reflected. So that's the theoretical piece, right? Is that idea that they're driving the learning of the institution. Right, the practical, yeah. Right? I don't want to separate the two, right? They're both important. So that's the theoretical piece. The practical piece is how this will flesh out. Is that once we have all of our courses mapped to all of our program outcomes, which is the work that we'll be doing next semester. Of course, we got to get the program outcomes in place. Then we got to map our courses to our programs to show where the learning is taking place in all of our courses at the program level. Then what we'll be doing is doing the second half of that, which is mapping to the general education outcomes. So not every single course is going to map to every single general outcome. Really what we're focusing on is the degree, the general education core, right? So for a degree program, when students are completing the general education core, that's really what the bulk of this is, right? And so those classes will be mapped to our general education outcomes. When it comes time to assess, right, we'll be looking at the mapping of which courses are being mapped to our general education outcomes. So for example, critical thinking. We'll take a look at all the courses that are being mapped to critical thinking, and those would be courses where you would run an assessment in those courses.
So I think for us, for like instructors on that class level, if we appropriately match the course objectives to the program objectives, then there should not be,
right, then we should be able to clearly see where the general education outcomes are being taught. Now, for example, when it comes time to assess critical thinking, we're getting real far down, this is in the next year, but when it comes time to actually design assessments for these, the courses that you will assess critical thinking, for example, will be courses where there is an assignment designed to assess critical thinking, right? There could be an assignment where you're like, oh, as a byproduct, right, they kind of have to use some of their critical thinking skills. But if that assignment is not designed specifically to, assess students' use of critical thinking skills, then that would not be an appropriate match. What we're looking for is where we can appropriately assess when that assignment or that project is designed to evaluate students' critical thinking skills.
So I'm thinking my class would probably more ideally flow into the quantitative literacy.
And that's probably appropriate, right? where in that case, your course, right, is mapped to that one. When it comes time to assess quantitative literacy, we look at your mapping, we see your course is going to be great for where students can demonstrate that learning, and so that would be an appropriate course that we would say, how can we design an assessment to see how students are doing, right? Because all of this is about our students, learning this skill as a result of being here at Triton.
But I also think sometimes when you're first coming to this concept, it's a little daunting.
Yeah.
And once you kind of get it rolling and kind of get the hang of it, it'll pop out to you that actually in what you do, there's an ethical component, right? As an component, right? So then there's global learning, right? Information literacy, right? Evaluating the quality of information, and so there, as you get rolling, you'll suddenly realize this isn't really that much of a stretch or that much of an exercise. It'll start to become more natural. I think right now it's all being thrown at you at once, and you're like, well, I'm going to do all this. Well, you already are doing a lot of this. It's just identifying, and that's
and the mapping. And that's where it comes to tying the theoretical with the practical, right? Because there's this side, there's this side of how many assessments do I have to run, what reports do I have to fill out, what do I have to do, right? But then the theoretical part is, if these are our general education outcomes, this is what should be driving the institution, right? This is what we're saying when we publish these is, as a result of coming here to Triton, you will be able to do these things as a result of graduating from one of our degree programs. And that is something that we can have a conversation about across departments, across areas, right? That's all of us as faculty, what we are teaching our students to do. They don't just learn quantitative literacy in your course, they're learning it before they come into your course, maybe after. Same thing with written and oral communication. They're not doing a presentation, just in their, or not practicing communication just in their English class, right? They have to do it in a variety of courses. So it's really starting to see how the student doesn't differentiate the skills I'm learning in each of these individual classes. They see it as, when they come to Triton, here are all the skills that I'm going to develop as a result of being here and engaging with the curriculum and engaging with faculty across the institution. So that's kind of how we tie the theoretical part and the practical part, is these concepts should be embedded, right, throughout our curriculum, throughout our teaching practices.
And it is naturally there already, right? That's what we do as faculty.
Absolutely.
That's what we do as an institution, because we are training and educating the next generation of global citizen, employee, whatever it is that we are doing. That in that education, you automatically, in order to make a healthy, happy, functional employee, citizen, whatever, they have to walk away with a certain number of skills. And that's why we can't get any fewer than 5, because like Luann said at the beginning, right, some of these things are not going away, right? Written and oral communication, right? You can't not teach that. It's just naturally part of what we're doing as part of the mission. So this is just sort of codifying and making it into a square.
Yeah, going back to kind of the vision for this work, it's creating this systematic structure, lasting structure for assessment. But when we're, talking about assessment, we're really talking about the student learning, right? Curriculum assessment. Oh, we got way more theoretical than I was thinking.
Yes, we did.
This is great.
But I also wanted to make sure, that it's very clear that part of what this open forum is for us to bring the information to you, but then for you to actually kind of chew on it a little bit and say, it's not us making a decision, it's as a body, right, as an institution, as faculty. We should be looking at these with critical eye and saying, hey, am I on board? Do I totally agree with that? Do you have feedback? Is there something you think is short, missing, over the target, right? That's the purpose of the open forum, is to really solicit input. Unless you just think that we're doing a great job. 2 thumbs up. Thumbs down.
Well, of course you're doing a great job.
But yeah, any thoughts or ideas or questions?
No, I really like the decrease from the 9 to 5. And I think we've captured the essence of what we want our students. We want them to be global learners. We want them to critically think. We want them to be able to communicate. Those are some of what our businesses are asking for. about hard and soft skills.
Absolutely.
So I think you did capture those.
Great, well, thank you for that feedback, that's really helpful. It was just confirmation that we're on the right path. Thanks. Anything else for us?
No, it's too soon. But in terms of designing those specific assessment tools,
Yeah.
you already have some ideas now.
So many ideas, yes.
So
And
many
then
ideas.
also that's going to be part of the professional development moving forward. So we still have the spring semester for those who are involved in the program plan, assessment plan developer role. We have that spring. And then we're looking to maybe do some professional development as well over the summer, potentially some, engaging in some of that as well. And then our plan is for the next semester to also have stipend positions for that kind of second phase where these things will be implemented. But yeah, we just got back from a conference. We have all the ideas for how to do that moving forward from what other institutions are doing, just really great ideas. And, obviously this is a full field, right, where these are a lot of expertise in the assessment field. And so, yeah, got to learn from people who are doing really, really great work. So we're excited to implement some of those ideas moving forward. But yeah, that will all be shared in professional development. Right? We're going to continue this plan of providing robust professional development around all of this. So we feel confident moving into some of these processes. But we'll be sharing that information as soon as it's all fleshed out. All right, guys. Well, let's talk about a couple next steps, right? So our last open forum, this one today, right? And then the last one is on Tuesday, November 6th. To get it to Dr. Flaherty in time for the vote for Academic Senate, I will be sending it over to him, basically as soon as possible after that last open forum where we'll have conversation. So I encourage you to, we had a full faculty email went out to all full-time and adjunct faculty, but I would encourage you as you go to your committee meetings or you head back to your departments to talk with your colleagues, share, hey, did you see that email from VP Baker, right, went to the open forum, have them read through, email me any feedback that you have, or either Christopher or myself. So that last open forum will be, I didn't upload my slide or update my slides, but the last one will be that Tuesday, November 6th, next Tuesday, and then same time, same place. If you want to see all of the rubrics, you can even just Google AAC and value rubrics and just get them all online. Again, I just printed out the ones that were appropriate for our conversation. And then please email any feedback to either me or to Christopher as you have time to go back to your office and think about it, mull it over, have any conversations with your colleagues. Please send us any feedback that you have. And then again, I would encourage you to have conversations with people this week. If you have any feedback, to bring it to the meeting on Tuesday, because then we are going to try to move it to Academic Senate for a vote. So just that's the timeline. That's how we're hoping to accomplish this work. So any conversation and feedback we can have before that would be great to hear your ideas, your comments, and your thoughts. All right. Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Yay! All right, go for it.
Yes, let's go.
This is going to hurt too.